Alright, hello everyone. So the banner for the Cavernous Wailing has just dropped, and I just want to talk about their kits in general. The numbers are really good actually, which is why I think that when their IDs drop, these egos would be worth pulling. And the good news for this banner is that you do not have to pull it at all, because all of these egos fall under the standard ego pool, which means you really don't have to wait. You don't have to like pull it right now. You can just wait and then farm 400 shards, spark them if you see that the ID is really strong or something like that. So no rush for this banner really. For Sinclair, I like it a lot because if you look at the elements, it is going to be Gloom plus Sloth, which I know, which when I go and check, Dieci and Rosespanner both share this same element here. You have a lot of Gloom generation in any Tremor team comp, and you have a lot of Sloth generation in any Tremor team comp. But in the Dieci clan, you also have a lot of Gloom and Sloth generation. You can go and look at all of them. They basically have a lot of these elements over here. So I suspect, right, that this ego here is definitely for a Dieci archetype, just because Blubber Bubble is only getting its full effect for when it is broken by the enemy, which means that you want to apply this effect and then have your Dieci characters apply a shield on themselves, and then you let them get hit. Because if they get hit, you will apply a random amount of sinking potency and count. Why do I say random amount even though it says inflict 4? Is because of the second line there that says how much of that 4 value is randomly determined, which means that you are applying a random amount. But for every time the shield breaks, whenever the shield breaks, then you will apply it. So you don't want too much shield, you do want a little bit of shielding, just so you can trigger the effect. So yeah, this ego is interesting in that it encourages you to not defend yourself at all. You like don't want to clash, you just kind of want to one-side every enemy in the game and just get yourself hit so that you can apply the potency and count of sinking to the enemy. So quite an interesting ego, and definitely fits the Dieci archetype of I want to get hit so that I can go and punch the enemy a little bit harder, especially for Rodion. Rodion has that passive as well as a shit ton of shield generation which she cannot stack. And the shield generation she gets is not very high because she's normally discarding the Gloom skill, which is a skill 1. If you discard the Gloom skill, you only get like maybe a 10%, 12% shield, if I remember correctly. It's not that big, and it's enough to tank one boss's like maybe 2 coin skill or something like that, and that will be able to help you stack your sinking potency and count pretty well. I like it a lot. I like this idea a lot, and I think it will definitely cook in a Dieci archetype. Furthermore, you will also be applying a 20% of this unit's max HP as shield to 1 plus highest resonance minus 2 allies. We are literally doing equations with this targeting system now, but essentially it's just up to 3 other allies can be hit with this, which means that you will need 5 resonance in order to trigger this and get all 3 of your allies hit with the Blubber Bubble. You need 5 minus 2 plus 1, which is going to be... Sorry, that's too much actually. It's 4 minus 2 plus 1. So you need 4 resonance in order to get the maximum amount of blubbers on everyone. Right, and then you need also 4 highest Gloom A resonance. So preferably your resonance here will be Gloom A resonance, and that will trigger 3 blubbers instead. And that will be quite a fat shield. The thing about the count of the blubber is that you want it to be as high as possible so you don't really have to reapply it again. If it's 3, then you have 3 turns before you have to reapply it, because at turn end, the blubber shield will be dropping itself, right? So yeah, that's why you kind of want to get the 3 as much as possible, and that's why it really only fits into a sinking team comp with Dieci, and try to get as much Gloom A resonance as possible when you trigger this. Corrosion effect is interesting because I think it actually has a purpose. It's because of the gain plus 10 aggro effect that it has, and that will give you the aggro and also give you additional shield equal to your something percent max HP, pretty much. So yeah, you get a lot of shield, and then you also get more shield here, and you also gain aggro. So it has its uses as a tank Sinclair archetype. So if it's Dieci Sinclair and you want to get hit with the blubber while Blubber is on you, then I think this corroded form actually has a purpose, just to generate aggro at this turn as well, so that you can maybe pull aggro off of your other Dieci characters who have been injured quite a bit, and then you use like Fluid Sac Files or something in order to go and heal up your team. Interesting, and looks like it actually has a purpose, but most of the time I think this alone, plus another Dieci character doing aggro, would be enough. And then the passive definitely points to Sinclair wanting to get hit as well, because if you have a shield, you gain prot, and if this unit is under Blubber's effect, you will get one additional prot. So yeah, definitely this character wants to be a tank that loves to get hit while punching his enemies as well, or can be just a full tank. I don't know yet, but essentially this is just all pointing to a tanky Dieci Sinclair ID, and I'm going to be looking forward to that a lot, because this ego here is actually pretty damn solid already with that 16 plus 8 clashing power. And yeah, this generally quite cheap for a Dieci gang to acquire these elements over here. Right, so that's Sinclair's ego talked about. It's a very solid ego. I like it a lot in terms of design. It promotes an interesting shield building archetype where you don't mind getting hit just to apply more sinking, or if you are scared of like a big AoE, you can feel free to just stack the shield and then just one side attack the guy or something like that. It gives you more flexibility, yeah. Right, moving on to Cavernous Wailing Honglu. Tentatively, Tremor Reverb has no cap on damage. The minute 1 testers have told me that Tremor Reverb literally does not have any cap on it, which means that if you have 99 Tremor potency, you will burst and you will do 99 sloth damage to the enemy, which makes this status here probably one of the best for Tremor. The others are Decay as well as the Bind's ego status, which I can't remember right now. Decay is defense level down, which is alright, and then Bind's ego will apply an additional stagger level if you stagger them, which means it will become stagger plus, which is very, very solid. But it only works when the enemy is about to be staggered. So that means, right, by default, you kind of want this to be on the enemy. And then if you are able to convert it into the other 2 statuses, you should try to do that and then reapply Tremor Reverb so that you can do quite a lot of burst damage. Unfortunately, that is also a very costly thing to do. So I'm really not sure about the Ufi Heathcliff Tremor Decay now, because defense level down is really not fragility. Like, if you have already staggered the enemy with an additional stagger level and you apply Tremor Reverb, that's generally already a lot of extra damage. And then if you stack the defense level, then yeah, it will be a lot more, because you get like, what, 18 extra defense level down if you stacked it to 99 Tremor potency. But it requires 2 egos to be used, and it requires a specific order, which your team might not actually be in the right order, because you want the defense level down to be as early as possible, right? So that means you want Ufi Heathcliff to go first, pretty much. But you can't really force that in this game, unless you use like Body Sack or something. In which case, you could do like Body Sack into next turn, Ufi Heathcliff skill 3, into Bind's ego for the stagger, into Cavernous Wailing for the Tremor Reverb, like a combo, right? But it's also very specific and quite expensive to do this combo, when in the first place you could just use Bind's ego when the guy's about to get staggered, and then you just use Tremor Reverb just to get free damage every time you burst, which by default would be the best option, because Tremor doesn't really have a lot of extra damage output from anything else. Except now, this status here is just so damn good, because it lets you do 99 burst damage every time you burst. So yeah, this is a really, really strong status, and honestly for Ufi Heathcliff, I think you can actually just kind of ignore that status. Because when you use Ufi Heathcliff skill 3, you will change all of it back to the decay, which means that you have to use Honglu's ego again. And if Honglu is not going immediately after Ufi Heathcliff, you would lose a little bit of extra burst damage, right? So yeah, it's a bit weird now. The ordering really, really matters to make this tremor amplitude conversion stuff work. Like, it's a combo, but you gotta make sure your speed is correct. And you can't really control the speed in this game, unless maybe Dante gets a new power that lets you go and control the speed. I really don't know. Right. So, I think tentatively, the only two good ones for amplitude conversion is going to be Tremor Reverb, as well as Tremor, the one from Binds that I can't remember the name of. Yep. So those two are good because Binds is just straight up when they're about to stagger, you apply, and then after that Tremor Reverb is just permanently on. Always leave it on the enemy, because this is straight up just free damage, and you will be bursting a lot, and you will be getting a lot of free damage with this. Really, really strong stuff. Definitely love this ego. But I'm also a bit disappointed that there's no Honglu Tremor ID right now. If you notice, right, he actually has the exact same elements as a Dieci or as a Rosespanner or any of the other Sloth archetypes, pretty much. Any of the Tremor Burst characters, because Sloth and Gloom are their favorite stuff. Pride is also a favorite of the Rosespanner gang, because Rosespanner Rodian also has Pride, which also leads me to suspect that this guy might be a Rosespanner ID instead, but I really can't tell as of now. But it would make sense because, I mean, he will be in a Sloth team and he will need some Pride generation, so he will need some Rosespanners in his team comp. So yeah, it does make a bit of sense there. And of course, the scaling of this part over here is just some minor scaling, really. You don't really care about the damage output that you will deal with this. You will care that you will be doing AoE of 3, which means you will be converting multiple Tremors into Tremor Reverb. And from what I can tell, there's no Tremor requirement in order to convert it into Reverb, which is amazing, by the way. I believe Ufi Heathcliff has a certain requirement of like, what, 20 total Tremor potency and count combined in order to convert to Tremor Decay. And this thing here just says, nah, you can just do it whenever you want. And that is already very amazing. It means that by default, you would just pop this ego at round start and just start stacking up that Tremor, really. Like, this ego is amazing. Definitely a must pull if you want to run any funny Tremor teams. You'll just have to wait for the ID in order to fill up this ego here. But this ego, tentatively, would be the must pull one for this banner, or must spark one, because this ego here has one of the most important statuses for Tremor in order to let them do actual damage and actually kill something, compared to just bursting into the stagger threshold and then just doing huge amounts of damage from there. Yep. Alright, so ultimately, with the release of these two egos here, one is definitely meant for a sinking archetype and one is definitely meant for the Tremor archetype. One is probably Rosespanner and one is probably Dieci, I'm not gonna lie. That's my guesses for the next few IDs. No Hindleys, no detective IDs. It's just gonna be Dieci plus Rosespanner. Rosespanner Honglu and Dieci Sinclair will be my best guess here. Yep. And then Honglu's ego here will be the most used ego for Tremor team, and it will probably be a must use, really, because this thing here is so important. I'm not sure if number 3 is okay. Yeah, number 3 is actually okay. You don't need to uptide that high. All you need to do is uptide to uptide 3 in order to get this status here, and you can ignore pretty much everything else. If you uptide to 4, I believe you don't really get anything else except additional damage scaling and more Tremor over here. And the passive actually kind of stay the same. It's 1 offense level, 2 defense level down, right? Yeah, it stays exactly the same, which means that uptide 3 is really all you need, because you're not really looking to do any damage with this thing, really. So yeah, uptide 3 is all you need for this ego, and then the passive here is when you trigger Tremor Burst on an enemy, you will inflict offense level down and defense level down, which is also amazing, man. It's amazing that he has defense level down on top of his important status here. And this is a passive, which means that the moment he uses one time, he will trigger all of this. He just needs the Rosespanner ID to make this work, really. Yeah, because he has straight up no IDs right now that will do any sort of Tremor Bursting at all. Corroded Form for this ego, nothing much to talk about. It just bursts twice instead. It's nothing much else to talk about. You will probably not be using this, you will just be using this to save some resource here and just apply the Tremor Reverb here. Alright, so that's really going to be it for this video, pretty much. I like both egos. I feel like they definitely will have a place in the team comps that I talked about. And all we need is just their respective IDs to be dropped. And then I would definitely recommend getting all of these egos immediately. But until then, these egos are in the standard banner, so once again, you do not have to go and get them immediately. You can just wait until the IDs drop, in which case you can go and pick them up and then have your funny Dieci team or your funny Rosespanner team. Alright, that's really all I have to say about this. If you found some additional information or I said something wrong, feel free to correct me in the comments below, and I shall see you guys next time. Bye bye.